Imagine leaning in to kiss a Roman aristocrat. You expect a scent of wine, maybe roses. Instead, you get a sharp, stinging punch of ammonia, like a dirty public restroom. Why? Because that perfect, blindingly white smile wasn't bought with mint toothpaste. It was scrubbed, rinsed, and gargled with stale, fermented human urine. Welcome to the true scent of the Roman Empire. Let us wake up together in the year 80 AD. You are in Rome, the greatest city on earth, the center of a known universe. But before you even open your eyes, the first thing that hits you is the smell. Forget the romanticized movies with clean marble floors and petals scattered everywhere. Rome stinks. It is a biological beast. It smells with smoke, unwashed bodies, rotting garbage, and something else. Something sharp and metallic that hangs heavy in the morning air. You roll out of bed. The sun is just hitting the 7 hills. You are a respectable citizen, maybe a merchant or a minor politician. Appearance is everything here. In Rome, ugliness is almost a crime. If you look weak or dirty or decayed, you are nothing. And nothing signals decay, quite like a mouthful of rotting, black teeth. So, you have a morning ritual. You walk over to your washing basin. There is no plastic tube of Colgate waiting for you. There is no soft nylon brush. Instead, you pick up a rough cloth, maybe a fraying stick, and a small pot containing a powder made of crushed oyster shells or bone. That is the abrasive. That is the sandpaper for your enamel. But the scrubbing is not enough. You need to whiten. You need to kill the bacteria that grew overnight after that feast of honeyed wine and bread. You need a mouthwash. You reach for a clay jar. It is uncorked, and the fumes hit you instantly. It makes your eyes water. It smells like an alleyway on a hot summer day. It is urine, but not fresh urine. Oh no, that would be amateur hour. This is stale urine. Aged, fermented, kept in a jar until it transforms into a chemical weapon. You take a sip, pause for a second. Really imagine that sensation. The liquid is warm, salty, and incredibly bitter. It burns your tongue. It fills your nasal cavity with the overwhelming stench of ammonia. You do not spit it out immediately. You swish it around. You force it through the gaps in your teeth. You let it sit on your gums, fighting the urge to gag. You gargle it, feeling the burn in the back of your throat. Why? Why in the name of Jupiter would anyone do this? Because it works. This is not superstition. This is chemistry. When urine sits and ages, the urea within it breaks down into ammonia. Ammonia is a powerhouse. It is a natural bleaching agent. It cuts through grease. It dissolves stains. It kills bacteria. Today, we use ammonia in glass cleaners and heavy-duty floor scrubs. The Romans use it to bleach their togas, and yes, to bleach their smiles. You spit the yellow liquid into a basin. You rinse with water, maybe chew on a parsley leaf or a laurel twig to mask the breath, but the underlying tang of ammonia remains. You smile in the mirror. Your teeth are gleaming white. The pain, the taste, the nausea, it is all worth it. Because when you walk into the forum later today, your smile will say, I am healthy. I am rich. I am civilized. It is ironic, isn't it? To be civilized meant gargling the body's waste product. But here's where the story gets even darker and more fascinating. Not all urine was created equal. If you were a poor plebeian, you probably just used your own. You piss in a pot, let it sit for a week, and there was your mouthwash. Free, sustainable, horrific. But if you were a wealthy Roman, a person of taste and culture, you would not put just any urine in your mouth. You wanted the best. You wanted the Dom Perignon of pee. And believe it or not, there was a market for this. The Romans believed that the urine from certain regions was stronger, more potent, and more effective at whitening teeth. The most expensive, the most sought-after brand of mouthwash, it came from Portugal, or, as they called it, Lusitania. Historians and poets from the time actually wrote about this. They claimed that the urine from the Iberian Peninsula was stronger. Maybe it was their diet. Maybe it was the water they drank. Or maybe it was just brilliant marketing by some ancient salesman who convinced the elite that foreign piss was luxurious. Imagine the logistics of that for a moment. Someone had to collect that urine in Portugal, seal it in amphory, clay jars used for wine or oil, load it onto a ship, sail it across the Mediterranean, unload it at the port of Ostia, transport up the Tiber River to Rome, and then sell in a shop for a high price. By the time it reached the consumer, it had been fermenting for weeks, maybe months. The ammonia concentration would have been off the charts. This was industrial strength whitener, and people paid a premium for the privilege of putting it in their mouths. This obsession was so well known, so common, that it became the subject of mockery. We have to talk about Catullus, Gaius Valerius Catullus, one of the greatest poets of the Roman Republic. He was savage. He wrote love poems, sure, but he also wrote diss tracks that would make modern rappers blush. There was a man named Ignatius. Ignatius was a Spaniard from the Celtiberian region. He had a great smile, a blindingly white smile, and apparently he smiled all the time. At funerals, at trials, when people were crying, Ignatius was there, grinning like an idiot to show off his teeth. Catullus hated him, and in one of his famous poems, poem number 39, he calls Ignatius out. He writes, and I am paraphrasing the Latin here to give you the raw meaning. Ignatius, because he has snow-white teeth, smiles all the time, but everyone knows that in the country of Spain, what each man pisses, he uses to scrub his teeth and his red gums every morning. So, the more polished your teeth are, Ignatius, the more it proves you've been drinking your own piss. Think about the burn of that insult. Catullus is not saying Ignatius has bad hygiene. He is saying the better his hygiene looks, the more disgusting he actually is. He turned the symbol of beauty into a symbol of filth. This tells us two things. One, everybody knew about the urine brushing. It was a fact of life. Two, even though they did it, they knew it was gross. It was a dirty little secret that everyone shared. You did it to look good, but you did not necessarily want to be reminded of the specific fluid you were swishing around your gums while flirting with a senator's wife. Let's pause and compare this to your life today. This morning, you probably walked into a bathroom with climate control. You picked up a tube designed by scientists in a lab. You squeeze out a paste that tastes like cool mint or cinnamon. It is fluoride to strengthen enamel. It has mild abrasives. It foams up pleasantly. It is refreshing. You take this comfort for granted. We all do. We have separated ourselves from the biological reality of our bodies. We flush our waste away with gallons of clean drinking water, never to see it again. We sanitize everything. We cover natural smells with artificial perfumes. For a Roman, there was no separation. The body and the city were one loop. What came out of you often went back into you or onto you. Waste was a resource. It was a tool. But the teeth were just the beginning. The mouth was just the entryway to the empire of ammonia. If you think swishing a little urine for 2 minutes is intense, you have no idea what is coming next. Because in Rome, urine was not just a mouthwash. It was a detergent that washed your clothes. It was the chemical that tanned the leather of your sandals. It was the fertilizer that grew your food. The Roman world was literally soaked in it. To understand the scale of this, we have to leave the privacy of your bathroom. We have to step out into the street. We need to follow the jars. We need to see where the rest of the urine went. Because millions of people were relieving themselves every day in this crowded metropolis, and the Romans were too pragmatic to let all that potential ammonia just flow into the sewer. They monetized it. They taxed it. They bathed in it. As you step out of your house, flashing your brilliant, urine-bleached smile at a neighbor, you are walking into a city that runs on pee. The toga you are wearing, that distinct, bright white fabric that marks you as a citizen of Rome, do you know how it got that white? Do you know whose hands and feet touched it before you put on? You might want to sit down for this. Because if you think the mouthwash was intimate, wait until you see the laundry. Now that your teeth are gleaming white, flashing that ammonia-bright smile, look down at yourself. Look at your clothes. If you are a Roman citizen of status, you are draped in a toga. It is a massive piece of wool, roughly 18 feet long. And it is white, not just off-white or beige. It is a brilliant, blinding, snowy white. This whiteness, this candor, is not just a fashion choice. It is a political statement. The very word candidate comes from candidus, meaning dazzling white. When a man ran for office in Rome, he rubbed his toga with extra chalk to shine even brighter. But here's the problem. Rome is a filthy city. You walk through mud, dust, ash from the bakeries, and soot from the fires. You sweat in the Mediterranean heat. You spill red wine and olive oil at banquets. How do you keep 18 feet of heavy wool pristine in a city without soap, without washing machines, and without chlorine bleach? You do not do it yourself. You send it to the professionals. You send it to the Falanica. Let's take a walk down the street to the nearest fuller's shop. You will smell it before you see it. If the jar of mouthwash in your bathroom was eye-watering, the Falanica is a chemical assault on your senses. It smells like 1,000 public restrooms boiling in the sun. You step inside. The air is thick and humid. Your eyes sting immediately. In the semi-darkness of the workshop, you see a series of large clay tubs or masonry vats sunken into floor. And inside those tubs are men. They are standing knee-deep in liquid. They are jumping, stomping, dancing in a rhythmic, exhausting motion. Up and down, like peasants crushing grapes for wine. But they are not making wine. They are the human washing machines of Rome. And the liquid they are stomping in is a mixture of water, fuller's earth, a type of absorbent clay, and gallons upon gallons of aged, fermented human urine. This is the industrial heart of Roman cleanliness. Stop and look at the workers. These are the full ones. They are mostly slaves or the poorest free men. Their job, day after day, from sunrise to sunset, is to trample your dirty underwear and your stained tunics in pools of stale piss. Why? Again, it comes back to the ammonia. Grease is the enemy of fabric. The oils from your skin, the fat from your food, it locks dirt into the wool fibers. Water alone cannot get out. The Romans did not have modern soap bars made of fat and lye, but they understood that ammonia creates a chemical reaction. When ammonia meets grease, it breaks it down. It turns the grease into a soluble substance that can be washed away. This is called saponification. So, these men are not just stomping. They are performing a chemical extraction with their feet. The ammonia dissolves the grime. The clay absorbs the oil, and the mechanical action of their feet beats the dirt out of the heavy wool. It was effective. It worked incredibly well. But the cost was human dignity and health. Imagine the skin on their legs, soaked in caustic ammonia for 12 hours a day, burning, itching, cracking, the fumes filling their lungs. And yet, this was a booming business. The fullers were powerful. They had their own guild. In Pompeii, one of the largest buildings discovered was the Fullery of Stephanus. It was a factory, but a factory needs raw materials. A mouthwash jar is one thing, but to fill these massive vats to wash the clothes of 1 million people, you need rivers of urine. Where do you get it? You cannot just rely on your own family's pot. This brings us to the genius and the grossness of Roman logistics. Rome realized that urine was a commodity. It was liquid gold, and you do not flush gold down the sewer. You harvest it. Walk back out onto the street. Look at the corners. Look near the stairwells of the apartment blocks. You will see large clay jars, dolia curta, set out in the open. These were not trash cans. They were collection points. If a passerby needed to relieve himself, he did not just find a dark alley. He was encouraged to use these jars. It was a civic duty. You were contributing to the economy. You were helping the laundry industry. And then there were the public latrines. The Forica. If you have never pictured a Roman public toilet, erase the modern idea of privacy from your mind. Privacy did not exist. Picture a long stone bench with keyhole-shaped openings cut into it, running along 3 walls of a room. No dividers. No stalls. 20, maybe 40 men sitting side by side, thigh to thigh, togas hiked up, doing their business while discussing politics, the gladiator games, or the price of grain. It was a social hub. You went there to meet people. Beneath them, running water carried the solid waste away into Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer. But the urine? In many places, the design allowed for the separation and collection of urine before it hit the water. Or slaves would be tasked with collecting it from specific vessels. Specialized traders, the urine collectors, would come with carts. They would empty the street jars and the latrine tanks. The smell of these carts moving through the narrow streets of Rome in the heat of August must have been indescribable. They hauled this cargo to the fooleries, where it was bought by the barrel. Yes, bought. Urine had a market price, supply and demand. And wherever there is money, the government eventually wants a cut. This brings us to one of the most famous anecdotes in Roman history. A story about a father, a son, and the smell of money. The year is 69 AD, the year of the four emperors. It was chaos. Nero had committed suicide. Civil war tore the empire apart. Generals were seizing power and getting murdered within months. Finally, a man named Vespasian took the throne. Vespasian was different. He was not a fancy aristocrat. He was an old soldier. Tough, pragmatic, and notoriously stingy. He looked at the empire's books and saw disaster. Rome was bankrupt. Nero had spent everything on golden palaces and parties. The civil war had destroyed the rest. Vespasian needed money. Fast. He needed to rebuild the capital. He needed to build the Colosseum. He raised taxes on everything. He taxed the provinces. He taxed the land. And then he looked at the urine trade. He saw the fullers making good money. He saw the tanners using urine to cure leather. He saw a resource flowing freely through a city, changing hands, fueling an industry. So he imposed a vectigal urine, the urine tax. It was a tax on the collection and distribution of urine from public latrines. If you wanted to scoop that liquid gold out of the public jars to use in your business, you had to pay the emperor. The people of Rome mocked him. They wrote graffiti about it. A tax on piss? It seemed beneath the dignity of a Caesar. Even his own son, Titus, was embarrassed. Titus was the heir. He was young, idealistic, and cared about public opinion. He confronted his father. Legend says Titus stormed into the room and complained that this tax was disgusting. It was shameful. It made the imperial family look like garbage collectors. Vespasian did not argue. He did not give a speech about economics. He simply reached into a bag of coins, the first profits from a new tax. He pulled out a silver denarius. He held the coin under Titus's nose. "Smell this," Vespasian said. "Does it smell?" Titus sniffed the metal. "No, father, it does not smell." And Vespasian delivered a line that would echo through 2,000 years of history. "Aci elotio est," and yet it comes from urine. Pecunia non olet. Money does not smell. It was a brutal lesson in reality. The source of the money does not matter. Only its value matters. That coin, minted from the tax on human waste, paid for the stone and marble of the Colosseum. Think about that for a second. The Colosseum, the symbol of Roman grandeur, the place where gladiators fought and martyrs died, the building that defines Rome to this day. It was funded in part by a tax on pee. When you look at the ruins of Rome today, you are looking at laundered money in the most literal sense. The tax was so successful that it stayed, and Vespasian's name became forever linked to toilets. Even today, in Italy, a public urinal is sometimes called a Vespasiano. In France, un Vespasien, the emperor who built the Colosseum, is remembered for where people take a leak. But this system went deeper than just taxes and laundry. It shaped the Roman mindset. They understood something we have forgotten: the circular economy. In our world, waste is something to be hidden, buried, or burned. We are terrified of our own biology. We buy expensive chemicals to destroy the evidence of our existence. The Romans lived in the mess. They wore the mess. They monetized the mess. When a Roman senator stood up in the Senate House to give a speech, wearing his brilliant white toga, he was a walking contradiction. He looked like a god, draped in clouds. But that cloud was created by a slave stomping in the waste of the city. The purity was manufactured from the filth. This duality defined them. They were a people capable of high philosophy and brutal violence, great engineering and grotesque hygiene. They built aqueducts to bring fresh water in, but they used urine to clean the result. And as we move from their clothes to their bodies, the story gets even stranger. Because if you thought washing your clothes in urine was extreme, wait until you hear what they did when they got sick. We have explored the mouth and the laundry, but the Romans believed this fluid had magical medical properties. They did not just use it to clean the outside of their bodies. They used it to fix the inside. Imagine you have a wound that won't heal, or an eye infection that is blinding you. You go to a doctor, a respected man of science, and he does not reach for a salve of herbs. He reaches for that familiar yellow jar. But this time, it is not for the fabric. It is for your flesh. We have washed your mouth. We have washed your clothes. But now, things get serious. Now you are sick. Imagine you are a Roman legionary stationed in Britannia, or a gladiator recovering from a nasty slice to the arm, or simply a mother whose child has a high fever. You do not have penicillin. You do not have aspirin. You do not have sterile bandages. You are terrified. Infection in Rome does not mean a sick day. It often means death within 48 hours. Gangrene, sepsis, the rot that starts small and eats you alive. You go to a medicus. He looks at your wound. It is oozing. It is angry red. And then, with the calm authority of a Harvard-trained surgeon, he prescribes the cure. He tells you to pour boiling urine on it. And if you are really sick, he might tell you to drink it. Welcome to the medical cabinet of the Roman Empire. To us, this sounds like madness. It sounds like something a witch would do in a swamp. But you have to understand the Roman logic. They were obsessed with the idea of humors. They believed the body was a container of fluids, and health was just a matter of balancing them. They looked at urine, and they did not see waste. They saw a distilled essence of the body. They saw a fluid that came from the seed of life. If it could bleach a toga white, surely it could burn the sickness out of a wound. The greatest encyclopedia of the ancient world was written by a man named Pliny the Elder. He was the Google of the first century. He wrote down everything the Romans knew about nature. And in his natural history, books 28 through 30, he lists cure after cure involving urine. And he gets very specific. Do you have a sore on your eyelid? A sty? Pliny recommends rubbing it with the urine of a child who has not yet reached puberty. The Romans believed that the urine of the innocent children was purer, chemically different. It was considered a milder acid, safe for sensitive areas like the eyes. Imagine that process. A mother holding a cup, waiting for a child to use it, so she can dab it onto her own infected eye. It is a level of intimacy with waste that we cannot even comprehend. But it gets worse. What if you've been bitten by a mad dog, or a scorpion, or a snake? Pliny suggests drinking your own urine immediately. The logic was that your body contains its own antidote. It is a closed loop. By re-ingesting your fluids, you're forcing the body to fight the poison. There were even recipes for general health. Some doctors recommended boiling urine down until it was a thick syrup, mixing it with honey and spices, and taking it as a tonic. They called it cleanser. And the scary part? Sometimes it actually worked, not because of magic, but because urine is sterile when it leaves the body usually, and it contains urea. Urea is antimicrobial. It kills fungi. It kills some bacteria. If you have a dirty, infected sword wound covered in mud, washing it with fresh urine is actually better than washing it with dirty river water. The ammonia cauterizes. It cleans. So, when those Roman soldiers were marching to the mud of Gaul, far from home, pissing on their own feet to stop trench foot or fungal infections was an act of desperation. It was standard field medicine. But the Romans did not stop at healing the living. They used urine to create life. We need to talk about the Roman pregnancy test. You might think pregnancy tests are a modern invention, with the little plastic stick and the pink line. But the Romans, borrowing knowledge from the Egyptians, had their own biotechnology. If a woman wanted to know if she was carrying a child, she would take 2 bags of seeds, 1 bag of barley and 1 bag of wheat. Every day, she would urinate on these seeds. If the seeds sprouted quickly, she was pregnant. If they did not sprout, she was not. And here's the mind-blowing part. Modern science has tested this. And it works. It is about 70% accurate. Why? Because the urine of a pregnant woman is high in estrogen. Estrogen is a growth hormone. It acts like a super fertilizer for the seeds, making them pop open faster than normal. They even went a step further. They believed that if the barley sprouted, it was a boy. If the wheat sprouted, it was a girl. That part, well, that part was less scientifically accurate. But the fact remains, they were using urine to decode the secrets of the womb 2,000 years before the invention of the microchip. This connection between urine and growth brings us to the countryside, to the vast farms that fed the empire. If you walk through a Roman orchard, say, a grove of pomegranate trees or grapevines, the air would smell sharp, familiar. The Romans knew that if you wanted sweet fruit, you had to feed the tree something foul. Columella, a famous Roman writer on agriculture, wrote detailed instructions on how to cultivate pomegranates. He said that to make the fruit juicy and red, you should water the roots with human urine mixed with water. Old, stale urine was best. They understood the nitrogen cycle, even if they didn't know the word nitrogen. Plants need nitrogen to grow. Urine is packed with nitrogen. It is the original miracle grow. The Romans were turning their waste directly back into food. The grapes that made the wine, which they drank at their banquets, were fed by the urine they excreted after the last banquet. It was a perfect, unending circle, the golden loop. But there is a darker side to this, a side that touches on magic and superstition. Because urine was so personal, so intimate, it was also considered a link to a person's soul. If you had someone's urine, you had a piece of them. Cursed tablets, depictions, have been found all over the empire. Lead sheets rolled up and buried, asking the gods to curse an enemy. May his limbs rot, may his mind fail. Often, these rituals involved polluted fluids. Witches and sorcerers were believed to use urine to spy on people or to cast love spells. If you wanted someone to fall in love with you, there were recipes that involved slipping a drop of your own fluids into their wine cup, a chemical binding, a forced intimacy. It makes you shudder, doesn't it? The boundary between clean and dirty simply did not exist for them in the way it does for us. For a Roman, urine was a tool. It was a weapon against disease. It was a fertilizer. It was a bleach. It was a commodity that could be taxed, sold, and traded. But as the empire began to crumble, as the aqueducts broke and the great knowledge of Pliny and Galen was lost or locked away in monasteries, this golden age of urine faded. The Middle Ages brought a new fear of the body. Hygiene collapsed. The industrial scale of the Roman fooleries disappeared. The chemical secrets were forgotten. However, the story does not end with the fall of Rome, because the chemical power of urine was simply too strong to stay buried in the ruins. In fact, the most explosive, the most dangerous, and the most glowing discovery in the history of chemistry would come centuries later. And it would come from a man who was trying to do exactly what the Romans did: find gold in a bucket of piss. This man was not a Roman. He was a German alchemist named Hennebrand, and his obsession with urine would literally light up the world. To understand how we get from a Roman mouthwash to the modern world, we have to follow the liquid gold into the laboratory of a madman. We have seen how it cleaned teeth. We have seen how it washed togas. We have seen how it healed wounds. Now, prepare to see how it created fire.